I'd like to ask, what would you consider the fundamental challenges of journalism in Nigeria?
To my mind, the fundamental challenge to journalism in Nigeria is really the sustainability, the capacity for journalists to be able to do good journalism at the present era. And this takes, if you like, different dimensions and different directions. In the first place, the institutions that produce journalism in terms of the storytelling that they do, in terms of the engagement they desire out of their storytelling, and therefore how they distribute the story. It's undergone very radical disruptions, in part due to the digital transition enabled by technology. But also, there is another kind of challenge that journalism is facing today, is the challenge of access to information. Journalism will be impossible to do if journalists will not have access to the right kinds of information to base the whole exercise of their storytelling upon. When this is lacking, as in every age, it becomes a crisis. So rumor mongering thrives. If this is enabled by censorship or very dictatorial political systems, then it can also lead to what you call prior restraint, where people then self-censor themselves. What we have here is a conflation of two currents, the margin of two currents, where on the one hand, the digital transition is creating a new ecosystem where a community of traditional consumers of news themselves have suddenly become producers of news. That's on the one hand. And that creates its own problem. The second is that the economic basis to do decent professional journalism itself, it's unavailable, one might say, and that creates, a double crisis. So looked at together, and I was speaking to one of our colleagues previous to this interview, what that means, if you put everything we're saying together, is that we are at a point, in the social sciences where you say you've gotten to a critical conjuncture. That means at a point where something has to change radically or it will totally disappear. So the prospect is so high, but it's unseen, both by media managers, teachers of the profession, and people who ought to care about the health of the profession. They can't even perceive this. So it's not escalated as a crisis. But yes, we've come to a very serious crisis point in Nigerian journalism, yeah.
How do you think the journalism can have more access to information?
Well, one is, of course, through this deliberate, courageous struggle of journalists themselves to break down those barriers. Because public officials in particular, sometimes, or more often than not, are the custodian of the information that we're talking about here. And because it is the job of the journalists to hold these institutions and the captains of these institutions accountable, there's a genuine disdain or fright to offer themselves for the accountability process that good journalism entails. So it's the old saying that power concedes nothing except you force it to. So there's an obligation of a struggle to do that on the one hand for journalism. But it's not only that. Let us say that journalism themselves, through new capacities, can deploy new tools, even where there's a reluctance by those who are custodians of this information to access it for public good. And this is where the general area of data journalism comes in. That, sometimes you probably don't need to give me the information, but I can get it myself.
Premium Times broke the news about Paradise paper on Sunday. Do you know if agencies like say EFCC or ICPC have access to these materials?
No, actually, this is the challenge of the, so one was talking about the new environment of journalism. This is part of what we're saying. There are certain traditional roles that have undergone a fundamental re-engineering in its processing. One of it, of course, is that the best investigations in the world today, they are not done by professional investigators in the law enforcement environment. They are being done by journalists, being done by great accountants and great lawyers. That's the history of the past 10 years or so, in the history of exposures, of investigation, and all that. So I will say, I know for sure, let me not say I will say, I know for sure that this information is totally unavailable in the law enforcement environment of Nigeria.
Yes. If either of these law enforcement agencies in Nigeria reach out to you for information that you have.
No, they have not. However, one should say, actually yesterday they had a little event for me, some of colleagues and friends, much more junior, that is in age, did something, and the vice president showed up, so he was seated by my side, and that's the question I asked him. That, okay, I said I had the finance minister saying that the administration is going to go after those who've been mentioned in the Paradise Papers, in terms of enforcement process. And I said, I hope this is true because, and he said, yeah, by the way, yeah. So I'll take it. So they haven't come to us, but I have the words from the vice president saying that they're going to do that. Now, let me give you a very quick. When we did the Panama Papers, and that's 1 year old, we had all the law enforcement institutions of Nigeria come to us, they needed help to get all these people. Nothing has happened. Indeed, Nigeria is the only country where the after effect consequences of exposures from Panama Papers had led to no ripples. Yeah, no consequence, so to say. So for the Minister for Finance to now suggest that something will happen, we really have to wait for something to happen. But there's no track record with this administration to believe that anything will happen. The nature of storytelling that we have now come to see in Nigerian journalism does not even lead itself to this kind of question that you are asking. It appears that, so if a newspaper will break a story, just take the example, whatever you see in centers of good journalism. If a newspaper will break a story today, the other papers, if it's of a public nature, they will jump on the story, extending it, happening. Here, it's as if it just died. So you have to ask yourself, why? Because it's not in the nature of the profession to just be silent. It's not like a one-man show. If you get a story, you can get it, you should do it. So what is responsible? I think, we have to make intelligent guesses why this is happening that way.
What would you consider the greatest impact that Panama, the leak or the Panama paper had on journalism now, looking at it from the global perspective? What impact would you say the revelation?
Well, one, of course, is that it's shown that investigative journalism is a strong mechanism for for uncovering these kinds of egregious crimes that normal journalism is probably unable to help with. Secondly, it's also shown that one area almost always overlooked in the past is the area of tax administration. That some of the most egregious crimes, the greatest corruptions that are forms of corruption happening in the world today is actually in the area of how people adjust between tax avoidance and tax evasion. You know, the theory in tax economics is that if you engage in tax avoidance, it is not illegal. But when you then evade tax effectively, so they then play on the words between evasion and avoidance. However, some of the greatest crimes have been layered on the process of tax avoidance. This is what we are seeing now in which Panama Papers investigation has helped us to see. That yes, it's not tax evasion outright, but tax avoidance. So that you can manipulate the rules, the fine letters of policies in such a way that you can then avoid paying huge sums of tax, and then you still look legal. You still look normal.
The Nigerian government, too, they've been talking really big about getting tax, ensuring that we pay taxes, and all of that. So it's quite surprising that the kind of attitude, particularly with this kind of revelation, and the kind of attitude that the Nigerian government showed towards the revelations, that though, well, it could just pass. Does these affect journalism, your passion for journalism, or affect how much you intend to push on investigative journalism, the reaction you get from the government when you go
No. Because it's never really going to be that easy. Yeah. And one should not expect ab initio the goodwill of people at the gatehouse of policy to just be nice when you're trying to dig into either crimes or misdeeds. So yeah, the frustration will be there, but the great measure of journalism, and particularly of an investigative nature, is to understand that it is like a mining process. The subsoil does not yield the whole nuggets of treasure that you're looking for, but you really continue to dig deep. Sometimes you meet cataracts, very stubborn, difficult rocks, but you just keep digging and digging. You break your tools in the process, but that's just part of the game. You have to just make sure, you get to the bottom of the rock, because that's really where, it's already also in all our traditional thoughts, like the man who wants to extract the honey from the rock bottom, you don't even look at the face of the axe. Yeah.
But particularly, what does this say about this current government, particularly because of the way they have so much shown interest in fighting corruption? And I mean, tax evasion is a kind of corruption. And so what does this say about this administration?
Well, but let me say that though, tax evasion is not so much what has been established as much as tax avoidance. Right.
For Panama Paper or for Panama?
Both. But what I'm saying is that, and you asked in a previous brilliant question, that what's behind, the surface. So avoidance is to bring awareness of games people play. That, so you can really keep your money in offshore accounts where you'll be shielded, so to say, from taxation, yet you are earning all the benefits of people who pay tax in your own original jurisdiction. Yeah. So it's a kind of morally dishonest position, but it's not legally, quote unquote, wrong. However, what I'm saying is that on that assumption, on that pedestal, are layers of the possibility of crimes. Now it is the responsibility of journalists to go now and see what layers of crime or what are the extensions in terms of criminality has emerged in the use and adoption of those avoidance practices. Yeah.
So what's your view on the future of cross-border collaborative investigative journalism, and how can investigative journalists in Nigeria tap into this?
Yeah, because the nature of crime has become network in nature and therefore cross-border in orientation. It is meaningless to then do most of your investigation on the basis of a single country alone. Take, what we are talking about here. So a man gets his money in Nigeria. Hopefully, he's making it in Nigeria. He ships it to Cayman Islands, thousands of miles away. The routing process of the money probably went through the financial hubs in London, or it can even go through different jurisdictions. Take the case of drugs. The networks are spread out in very complex architecture, and this is just the nature. So it makes no sense to attack a problem of a network dimension, of a network nature, without using network tools too. Yeah. So cross-border investigation is the answer to the nature of crimes in the current era. Yeah, it really has to be.
Let's talk about you a little. People said really nice things about you, and they've also accompanied it with some of the difficult moments, going through your career and all of that. But in all of this, that they have said, the challenges and stuff, the hard time, and you kept pushing through the part of journalism. What kept you going?
The great black writer W.E.B. Du Bois used to say when he left the United States and settled before he died in Ghana, Accra, he used to say to the then late president, the first president of Ghana, Nkrumah, that, the greatest tragedy a man confronts is to give up and just dissolve into cynicism, because the great days of answer are sometimes elusive. They are choked with uncertainties. They are stuck with reversals to then think that the great future never emerges. Yeah, so you could then say that, since I've come from a whole background of multiple failures, and but I've also seen, I have my chest full of great successes. So sometimes you get it wrong, sometimes you get it right. But that must never stop you from struggling for the next phase of life.
So journalists matched the military. You needed courage to overthrow them. How do you think we can raise another generation of journalists that will be willing to sacrifice for the truth?
The process must begin, and it will be through training, through creating structures to engage journalists, through improving journalism itself, through mentorship. It's going to be a cocktail of processes. For instance, in the organization I belong to, we have a youth mentorship program that currently has about 400 students and young journalists. You really have to create. You have to renew the future deliberately. It cannot just be by accident. So you have to, invest in it. And that's how sometimes these things don't just happen like that. You have to purpose the future.
Many have judged this administration as huge disappointment. I mean, what is your assessment of the Buhari government?
Well, there are many ways to answer your question, but let me just take one that I always tend to make. I think that the Buhari administration is a definition of a failure to manage diversity. That's, for me, is the most because what is the essential character of Nigeria as a nation is the fact that it is diverse. The job of a Nigerian leader, even if you do nothing, just to manage with creativity, with intelligence, and with truth and compassion, the nature of this diversion can take you a whole mile along the path. So it might well be a capacity issue, or indeed it might be what you might say, could it be deliberate, or what you say willful ignoring of that central character. So I know people have tried to raise the whole question of unanswered response to the kinds of promises they made. They came with such loud. We need to measure these things critically. A center like the CDD is through its Buhari meter has been measuring and trying to correlate campaign promises towards those claims to deliverables, and generally has found on the balance that the administration has fallen far short of that. Okay, so that's an issue. You could also measure them on account of the kinds of response they've given to human rights issues. You could take any number of yardsticks to look at this administration. For me, where they have shown flagrant and perhaps the most abysmal lack of measure is in their just total, it's either lack of comprehension, lack of capacity, how to manage diversity.
There's also been uprise of censorship of the media, free speech, and particularly during this administration. While we're outside, a lot of people mentioned this too. And so, do you really feel disappointed about how this government, particularly because they rode on the back of the media, how they have treated media and media practitioners? Do you feel any sort of disappointment whatsoever?
You see, you really have to look at what this government is promising, or what they promised at origin, and indeed look at within its own internal archaeology, if you like, what they are actually capable of providing. My sense is that it's not as if they rode on the back of a media as much as they used a kind of media which is not really an accountability media. It was the first point that we were making when you were asking for the type of definition of this media that we have to talk about. If the media is unable to be very critical, to be very investigative, to be very incisive, it will just be an echo chamber, of the current of a political process. So I agree, though, as there are monitored results of this process, that at least this government has not done well with regards to freedom of expression and therefore of media. Even my own organization, we try to track a process that has shown at least 25 huge violations in the first 9 months of this year. That's too much, for an organization that makes all this popular claim. But what I'm saying is that let's not forget also that, okay, they are doing that, but the media itself must rise up and challenge, this administration with intelligence, with data, and with the lightning rod of accountability.
If tomorrow some kind of appointment, political appointment comes, will Mr. Dapo Olorunyomi take one?
It's too late in the day. I had too many political appointments in my life that I rejected. I'm not interested in political appointment. The only thing I wanted to do is to do journalism. There are only 3 things I've done in my life. I've done journalism. The only time I've left journalism by shade, I've done anti-corruption work at EFCC, and I've done effective human rights work. If I ever leave this place, I'll be going doing teaching. I'm not interested. Not. I have no ambition, if you like, regarding political.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much.